In 3 more weeks, it's going to be over. Isn't that wonderful? 3 more weeks, and what a frantic time we're living in. Can you imagine how frantic everything is? And there are only 23 more shopping days until Christmas. Wow, just 3 more weeks. Got to tell you something. I've got some really, really great news for you, and that is you don't have to worry about it. I have some great news for you. And you ought to just rejoice in this period where there's so much upset about getting this present and buying that present and what they give me last year and how much should I spend on them this year and getting the house decorated and trying to satisfy whether we're going to Mama's house or to my mother-in-law's house for Christmas lunch. Don't worry about it. Guess why? Because in 19 more days, this world is going to come to an end. I mean, folks, how else could it be? Because you see, there is that civilization, the Mayan civilization, down in south of Mexico and Central America. They figured it out on the calendar. And I was amazed as I researched this, the size of some of those calendars. You see the size of that? Can you imagine? Somebody must have really needed glasses to make a calendar that big. You don't have a calendar big anywhere near your house and everything. But I'm telling you, this calendar's got it all figured out. And it's all over the news. And so I don't want you to worry. Don't you worry about that at all, because all you've got is just 19 more times to do homework. You have less times than that because you get out of school. Well, do you get out of school by the 21st or whenever it's all supposed to end? I'm telling you, don't you worry about it. And listen, don't you buy any presents. I just want to give you some good advice. And if you really believe that date, I'll make a bet with you. You write me a check and date it December 2nd. And if the world doesn't end, then I'll just cash that check. How would that be? This Mayan calendar, what do you know about it? Well, can I encourage you to hang on, and somewhere 10 minutes from now I'm going to put a disclaimer to what I'm about to say. But I want you to understand that if you only listen for the next 5 minutes, you're going to go out and say some things that, well, wait till you get to the disclaimer. I just want you to listen. After I get to the disclaimer, you might want to stop, though I think the best part, the dessert, comes after that. But this Mayan calendar, what do we know about this? Well, can you trust it? Can you trust this calendar? The Mayan civilization was down in Central America, and the classic period of it, as it's described, was from about 250 to 900 A.D. And it's amazing what those people were able to do, and I'm serious about that. Some of those pyramids that are down there, in Mexico and all in that part of the world, they're just remarkable in how brilliant these individuals were, and so many of the things that they figured out in relationship to that. And so we got this Mayan calendar, and evidently the last date on it is December the 21st, 19 days from now. What about that prophecy? What about the people being stirred up by that understanding? Can you trust that? You have any faith in that there just might be an element of truth to that? Well, suppose that I were to tell you that this Mayan calendar, that nobody's sure exactly the date, as I tried to research finding the precise date that it was made, but it's at least 1,100 years ago, if it were done right at the end of the Mayan civilization. It's at least 1,100 years old, maybe 1,200 years old from that period of time, and it may be older than that. Suppose I were to tell you that on that calendar they have discovered so many other remarkable things that are on there other than the fact that the world is going to end. And it is all tied to what happened in Central America, there in the Yucatan Peninsula and in Honduras and in El Salvador, and in the civilization that whenever the Mayans just sort of disappeared. Nobody knows for sure what happened to them. Great, massive civilization. And then after that, you've got the next civilization, the Aztecs. And sometimes it's difficult to determine where the Mayan part of it ends and the Aztecs part of it begins. But we know a lot about history, about what happened in Central America, because Central America had the arrival of the Spanish in the 1500s. In the early 1500s, the Spanish arrived down there in Central America. Now, suppose I told you that the Mayan calendar gives some really specific details about the fact that sometime in the future, and there's some indication of the date. Suppose I were to tell you that there's an indication of the exact time when that would happen. And suppose I tell you, as men began to study that calendar, that they found on it the name of Hernando Cortez. Because you see, he was the Spanish warrior that did so much and that impacted so much of the world that was there. And suppose I were to tell you, as they deciphered all of this writing that is on that Mayan calendar, that they found the man's name. You know, hundreds of years before the man was ever born. In fact, suppose I were to tell you that it talked about him and about the very city in which he would be born. And here these people are there in Central America, and they talk about suppose I were to tell you, they talk about another world over in Spain and mention the very specific city where Cortez was to be born. Would you have any faith in that calendar? Suppose I were to tell you that as they deciphered that, they began to look at the genealogy that was there about Cortez, and they went back 40 generations. Would you have any faith if I told you, as they deciphered what was on that calendar, would you have any faith if they could go back 40 generations? You probably can go back no more than 4 or 5 generations. And those of you who tried to trace your family tree until you got discouraged when you found out what renegades were on it, but 8 or 10 generations, 15, 20. Suppose I were to tell you that on this Mayan calendar there is the name of his forefathers, name after name, from 40 generations ago. Would you have any faith in this calendar? Suppose I were to tell you that as they deciphered this Mayan calendar, they read specific details about the fact that Cortez was there, and he came. One account suggested that he might have been a part of Columbus's trip. But at least for sure after that, in 1518 or 19, he came to Hispaniola. He also went to Cuba, and then he went over in the Yucatan. Suppose I were to tell you that the Mayan calendar told about his geographical journeys. Talks about his coming, talks about his ancestry, talked about the city of his birth, and talked about what he was doing. And though we do not have have the next concept onto the slides about the very temperament that he had, suppose that I were to tell you that there's a prophecy about Cortez on this calendar that said his friends turned against him. That he went back to Spain and ended his life there in poverty, though he'd been one of the wealthy. For you see, he was a ruler down in that part of Central America back whenever he was exploring that and conquering the Aztecs who were there. Suppose I were to tell you That's every word up there is true. Would you have any confidence in this calendar? Are you listening? There's not a word of it that's true. That's the disclaimer. You see, this concept about the end being at hand, it is remarkable what people have done and how they have captured this date that is there and have decided exactly how it's going to end. Those of you who are astronomers are interested in that, you need to understand that there is a rogue planet that is rushing toward the earth. And in 19 days, it's going to smite the earth, and it's going to hit the earth on the 21st of December. That is so widely believed that even NASA has had to put out a disclaimer in relationship to it. People are so excited about the fact, and you wait in the next 3 weeks and see how much. When did we hear about it? First part of this year? And now here we are 3 weeks away from it, and people have come up with all of these fanciful ideas. You know what's going to happen in 19 days? Well, some folks have figured out what's going to happen, and what will happen is that the electromagnetic fields of the earth will be reversed, and the earth will hurl itself 30,000 light years toward the black hole that is in the middle of the Milky Way. Don't worry about it. You won't live 30,000 years, but you're about to go on a journey of 6 trillion miles in a year's time. I don't know what 6 trillion times 30,000 is. You got your calculator and try to figure out that number. But there are folks out there who have captured a hold of it. Now, on the other hand, there are those individuals who are saying what is prophesied is a time of peace and tranquility, and everything's going to be wonderful and everything's going to be all right. You have any confidence in that? You look at the things that are there, and I've made up all of the points that are on the screen. Listen to that. That's my disclaimer. I just said that to get your attention. But there is another calendar. It's right here. A calendar of the history of mankind. From the time that God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. From the time there was a Garden of Eden and there was a man named Adam and his wife named Eve. There is a calendar of events of the things that have happened and that are happening now and that will happen until that time comes, when the real end comes. But you see, there are those who say that the Bible and the prophecies found in the Bibles and the teachings that's found in the Bible are just as trustworthy and no more trustworthy than the Mayan calendar. It is remarkable, by the way, just in passing, that they have found an older Mayan calendar that predates the ones that people are quoting from, and it has dates far beyond 19 days from now. I don't know if you saw the cartoon or not of the man with his chisel on, chiseling the words right into that big stone circle. And he came to his boss and said, I've run out of room to put any more dates. And the boss says, oh, don't worry about it. Nobody will ever be concerned about it. Is that the nature of the Bible? Is your faith built on something that has no more credibility, perhaps even less credibility, because the Bible is full of contradictions and stupidities and all of these things? Is that the nature of the Bible? Is there nothing more to your faith than the faith that there is some rogue planet only 19 days away? Remarkable we haven't been able to see it. It'd be much larger than the moon as it hurls toward this earth. No more credibility than the faith there is in the hearts of those who really believe 19 days from now it's all going to end. Is there no reason for our faith? In our imaginary story, we talked about Cortez, who, by the way, is the man of history. And historically, what I said about him and his birthplace and the exploration that he did and the trip that he made to Cuba and the trip that he made over to the Yucatan, those are historical facts. But not a word of them is found on the calendar, the Mayan calendar. What about this book? What about the prophecies in this book? And you get to the end of the Old Testament, and it's some 400 or 500 years between the last page of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament. And so all of these prophecies that are found not in a book written by Christians, but found in Jewish literature. Not something that Christians have tried to manufacture, these 39 books of the Old Testament. They're from another situation, from another religion, from Judaism. And these prophecies, some of them are 1,500 years old. Some of them even greater than that. Most of them are at least 700 years before they ever came about. Now, if you would have faith in the Mayan calendar because it would give all of this information about Cortez, what about the facts that are found in the Bible? What about the prophecies that are found in the Bible? What about the prophecies that talk about the place of Jesus' birth and the fact He would be born of a virgin, the miracles that He would do, of the fact that He would travel down to the land of Egypt, and that there would be the slaughter of the infants at the time of His birth? Folks, that happened. But that's not the product of Christians trying to forge a Bible. That's from the Old Testament, from the Jewish Bible, where the prophets of old said that someday something amazing, something wonderful is going to happen. And here's the kind of thing that's going to happen. A virgin shall be with child. And you'll find this child in Bethlehem. You'll find about the fact that he will go down to the land of Egypt. He'll come up out of the land of Egypt. That the infants will be slaughtered. And that's in books that were written at least 700 years before the events came about. I don't have any faith in the Mayan calendar, because none of the things that we put on the screen that we were alleging, and I said, and listen to how many times I said, suppose that I were to tell you. For it's just supposition that I came up with. Suppose I were to tell you, prophesied about the city of His birth. But there is no supposition about the prophecy about the birth of Jesus. The wise men came and says, where is He? And the scribes opened up the Bible and found that passage in Micah chapter 5 that says He's going to be born in Bethlehem. Would that build your faith in the trustworthiness of this book? Got the matter of the miracles that are there. Do you know how specific the Bible is prophesying about the miracles of Jesus. Isaiah chapter 35. The eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped, and the lame man shall jump up like a deer. Do you understand how specific that is? And how literally it was fulfilled? What about the prophecies that he would be a king? They would be a descendant of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Judah and David. And Abraham is 40 generations in the ancestry of Jesus. God said to Abraham 2000 BC, 1900 BC, I'll give you a land. I'll make of you a great nation, put them in a land, and I'll send a great Savior. And in your seed, one descendant, will come a blessing for all mankind. And the ancestry of Jesus, 40 generations before he was ever born, was prophesied. And David comes along, 1,000 years later. And the promise is made to David. I'll set up thy seed on your throne. He'll be a king like you are a king. He'll be a prophet like Moses. Moses, who brought a brand new religion to the Jews, I will raise up a prophet from among them, among their brethren. He'll be like you. He'll not be like Elijah. He'll not be like Elisha, who were a part of that Old Testament covenant. But there will be a prophet like Moses who brought the Old Testament. There will be a prophet who will bring a New Testament. 1,500 years before he was ever born. He'd be a priest like Melchizedek. Hebrews chapter 7 and 8 and 9 discuss the priesthood of Jesus. The Bible talks about the fact that he would live in Nazareth. How on earth could a poor Jewish boy born in Bethlehem, how on earth would he ever go to Egypt? How on earth would he ever wind up in Nazareth? How was that in the book if God's not a part of it? What about the fact that he'd be betrayed by a friend? And that prophet was so specific that said he will be betrayed not for 29, not for 31, but for 30 pieces of silver. And those 30 pieces of silver would somehow be used to purchase a plot of ground where there is the clay that they make pottery from, the potter's field. Can you have any trust in a book that hundreds and hundreds of years before he was ever betrayed by a friend? Can you have any confidence in the fact that there was a book that said that's what's going to happen? And here's the price of his betrayal. Not 29, not 35, but 30 pieces. And those 30 pieces of silver will buy a plot of land and the kind of soil on that land will be the kind of soil that can be used for pottery. I don't have to say, suppose I were to tell you, for this is not supposition. It is reality. You know what this book talks about? About Jesus coming as a king, riding on a donkey. About the fact that during his trial, somebody would spit in his face. What are the odds of that happening? What are the odds that no bones would be broken in a time of crucifixion or in the time of beating that he endured before he was crucified? Suppose I were to tell you that the Bible specifically said that he would be given vinegar to drink. That's not a supposition, that's reality. Imagine this book talking about him being associated with the wicked, with the criminals, the thieves on the cross, and he would be associated with the rich in his death. And that book says his body was not left in the grave. Nostradamus, people quote from, and the prophecies that are found in Nostradamus are so vague, you have to stretch your mind to be able to see any correlation between what he has said and what actually occurred in history. But that's not the nature of prophecies about Jesus. Look at it. Bethlehem, Egypt, Nazareth, 30 pieces of silver given to a friend. And the odds of that silver betrayal money being used to buy a potter's field, the fact no bones would be broken, that they would gamble over his garments. These are specific prophecies, that they would spit in his face. Not some vague statement that someday there will come someone who will be hated. That's true of any statement anybody could ever make about the future. That there'd be some nation that would arise. That's true of history. But the prophecies about Jesus are specific. And the only conclusion that you can arrive at is this book is trustworthy. You know what this book says? Of that day and hour no man knows. Of the times and the seasons you have no need that I should write unto you. Chris read that so well. You yourself know that the Lord comes as a thief in the night. You know He's coming. But nobody else has ever known when He was going to come. There will be an end. But even the angels of heaven don't know when it's going to happen. There will come that day when there will be a stirring in heaven, when the trumpet is given to an angelic being that says, "Sound the trumpet. This is the end." But no angel in heaven has any idea better than you do as to when that will come, as a thief in the night. You know what this book says? That when that time comes, all the dead will be raised. Can I trust that? Go back and look at the natures of the prophecies that were made 700 years, 1,500 years before Jesus was ever born. And every single one, you remember how many prophecies? 332 Old Testament prophecies. And we've looked at probably 25 or 30. And every one of them came about. Every one of the 332 prophecies in the Old Testament have come about without a failure. And the God who wrote those is the God who says that the hour is coming in which all that are in the grave will hear His voice and come forth. John 5:28 and 29. You can believe that and trust that with all of your being. You can trust that with your very soul. All of the dead will be raised. And at that time, this earth will be destroyed. not by some rogue planet that's hurtling itself at the earth, but the heavens and the earth, all of the stars, all of the galaxies, all of the planets, all that is here in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, will be no more. 2 Peter 3, the earth and the works will be burned up. And you can bet your soul on the fact that's going to happen. Risk your soul on the fact this earth is going to be destroyed. And there will be that judgment when the Son of Man comes in His glory with all of His holy angels. Then before Him will be gathered all nations. Matthew 25, 31, 30 and 31. And He'll separate them. The righteous from the unrighteous. Like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And you can risk your souls on that very truth. And this book says, there will be after that the destiny. One described as heaven, the other described as hell. And you can risk your soul on the reality of that. Guess what? This very day, you've already made a decision. And not you can if you so choose. You already have made a decision as to whether to risk your souls on these truths found in this book that you can trust. Your destiny lies in your hands. And whether you're on the right or the left, whether you are a sheep or a goat, will be determined by you. It'll be determined by whether you believe this or not. I challenge you to use that intellect, to use that brain that God has given you, use that ability to look at facts and consider facts, and to understand that the evidence is there, the enormous improbability of 332 prophecies ever happening in the lifetime of one man, impossible to calculate in numbers that any of us could express. You can believe in that. And you can believe in Him who was born in Bethlehem, who came as a prophet and a priest and a king, a sin bearer. You need to believe in Him, but not in some intellectual way, but to the point that you say, I'm going to commit my life. I'm going to change my life because I believe that with all of my heart. And without any shame, I will confess that I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and then I can be baptized. He died, and my old man must be put to death. That's the crucifixion of repentance. And that which is crucified is buried, washed in the blood of Jesus. Arise and be baptized and wash away your sins. Risk your soul. Risk your destiny on the reality of the truthfulness of these things. And the most amazing thing is, you become a part of His family. God is not a terrorist, a terror, somebody to be feared as an evil being, but the one who will embrace you and say, my son, my daughter, my child, I love you. And He'll add you to His family, to the church. And then He says to those of us who've done that, don't you let up. that conviction that caused you to become a child of God, that faith that you have, you be full of faith. And the fullness of the faith that you can have when you've been a Christian for a year is greater than it was before you ever became a Christian. And when you've been a Christian 25 years, that faith is so deep, it is you. I'm not going to be surprised, are you, that there will be a trumpet and we shall see Him. The only decision that you need to make is to follow Him. If you've decided to follow Him, won't you let us help you in your service to Him in any way we can by coming to the front right now as together we stand and sing. Will you come?